The Stranger from the Acolyte duels far differently from any Force wielder that we've seen on screen in Star Wars canon, showing that he is not only used in Jar Kai, but also the ancient technique of tracata. Greetings, students of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. As Yord puts it, the Stranger fights like nothing that they've seen before. He doesn't obey the rules of combat. He also forces the Jedi to fight on two fronts, entering their mind as he stays there, disrupting their very balance to the Force and their concentration. It is very clear that the Jedi of the High Republic era have not experienced an enemy like this in hundreds of years. The Sith Order's approach to lightsaber combat is extremely unique, and typically falls into two categories. Either the Sith Lord adopts techniques and skills that disrupt the Jedi, or they elevate themselves to such a level using the Jedi arts that no Jedi can stand in their way. Examples of this would be Count Dooku and Darth Vader, who would use every advantage at their disposal. However, they operated on simply being superior to the Jedi in terms of lightsaber combat. Vader and Dooku didn't necessarily need subterfuge in order to defeat the Jedi that they came against. They were simply too massively powerful and too skilled. Not to mention, they each fought with a Jedi lightsaber form. Makashi, who was used by Count Dooku, as well as Jem So and Sarisu, who was used by Vader, were all Jedi-adopted lightsaber forms that were frequently used among the Order. And although as the Clone Wars raged on, the use of Jem So was becoming more and more of a heated point, especially among the Jedi Council and how aggressive Anakin was, Jem So is still very much a Jedi lightsaber style. So what about the Stranger? What makes his approach to lightsaber combat so different than the other Sith? Why does the Sith break away from all of the Jedi and Sith traditional rules of lightsaber combat in an effort to destroy his Jedi enemy? One thing is very clear, as Darth Bane put it: the Jedi fight with honor and the Sith do not. Bane even famously said that honor was for the dead. And it is because of this that Chimere fights with no honor whatsoever, not only utilizing cortosis, but in the very lightsaber form that he decided to specialize in Jar Kai, and even more extreme tracata. The Stranger uses deception, hiding a lightsaber shodo constructed within his own lightsaber. It is with this shodo that he utilizes the tracata method. Typically when a duelist utilizes a smaller lightsaber shodo, as we see with the Stranger here, it is used mainly for defensive purposes. In Legends continuity, Luke Skywalker would even construct a red lightsaber shodo that he would utilize against Lumaya and her light whip, using the shodo to absorb a lot of the strikes that Lumaya had with the light whip, and then using his main lightsaber as his offensive weapon. And with Lumaya's razor sharp weapon occupied by the shodo, Luke Skywalker could attack as he pleased. But Chimere does not use his lightsaber shodo as a defensive weapon whatsoever. He uses it to further the manipulation, as a purely offensive trick, as we see he uses it against Jeki. Typically, utilizers will use Jar Kai dual blade fencing in an attempt to have two options for defense and two options for offense. But this is not how Chimere fights whatsoever. Typically, we see him favoring a single blade. He is very aggressive, leading many of us to speculate that he uses Form 7 Jem So. This also makes sense, as his lightsaber style is extremely difficult to predict and to counter simply due to its sheer randomness. This is a staple of Form 7 lightsaber combat, and one that the Stranger utilizes to perfection. But what about the lightsaber shodo and the method of tracata? In many Jedi circles, the lightsaber shodo is actually frowned upon, despite individuals and Jedi masters such as Sora Bulk and others such as Ahsoka Tano using a secondary lightsaber shodo, or a shorter lightsaber. In the art of lightsaber combat, Count Dooku would even come out against the use of a second shodo blade, stating this: "The shodo is a short saber with the blade extending perhaps a half meter. The shodo is often wielded in a Jedi's offhand as a secondary blade. The guard shodo is carried by means of a perpendicular handle, allowing for spins that put an opponent off balance but put oneself at risk also. I, Dooku, do not condone the use of the guard shodo." Interestingly, Yoda would also write this on the side of the page: "Not a secondary weapon for those smaller Jedi." Just like the Jedi of the High Republic era, Dooku was strictly adherent to Makashi and lightsaber forms. Unlike Chimere, Dooku followed all of the rules of combat, but the difference is, Dooku beat the Jedi not using subterfuge and tricks. He beat Jedi on pure skill alone. However, it has been said that it is more Sith-like to use whatever you can to your advantage, and it is clear that Dooku fought with far more honor than the typical Sith would, as he of course was trained as a Jedi. What is clear though is that Chimere was not trained by the Jedi. They cannot predict his movements, they cannot anticipate his next strike, and Tracata makes this even worse. Tracata is considered one of, if not the cheapest trick in all of lightsaber combat. It was viewed as highly dishonorable. Even large swaths of the ancient Sith Empire would call this a trick. Tracata takes advantage of the ability to turn one's lightsaber on and off in the heat of a duel. What's fascinating is it was actually created by a Jedi Master, a Jedi Consular no less, one who should be focused more on the studies of the Force than lightsaber combat. They developed this style in the Old Republic era, meaning that it is a very ancient lightsaber dueling form. The Jedi Consular said they created the form as a way to diversify lightsaber combat by implementing feints, and revolved around one quickly shutting off their weapon and then reactivating it at the precise moment. The Sith Lord Exar Kun used this quite well against Jedi during the Old Republic era. The description of Tracata says this: philosophically, Tracata involved practical combat and deception, rather than single-minded determination or endless patience. It was surprisingly sparingly used by the Sith, as their power came from passion rather than practicality, and neither was it commonly used by the Jedi because of their unwillingness to rely on deception. The latter may, however, have utilized this technique on occasion, the Jedi's purpose usually being to exert greater influence over the Force. This is very important as it indicates that it is not popular among the Sith either, and perhaps the stranger has adopted this form to not only give him an advantage over the Jedi, but studying an ancient style may just give him an advantage over his potential Sith master. The reason I believe Chimere has a master is his main goal is freedom, not only from the Jedi, but freedom to use his power as he sees fit. The one governing him is likely a greater Sith master, and he has not let his dark influence free on the galaxy as he wants to. He is simply not ready yet as an apprentice. Therefore, he is seeking out an acolyte to potentially overthrow the master who still remains in hiding. It's clear that the stranger will exploit any and every single advantage that he can get. That is what makes this Sith Lord so compelling. In the past, characters like Maul, Dooku, and Vader have tried to defeat Jedi purely off of their martial skill alone, and as we see here, the stranger is not only very gifted in lightsaber combat, but is also unwilling to fight fair, something that is very reminiscent of the beginning of the Rule of Two Sith, such as Darth Bane. The stranger fights disgracefully, but of course he doesn't care. He views himself as superior to others, and his very selected lightsaber form also shows his philosophy on the galaxy itself. He will fight the way that he wants to. He is more powerful. The ones that surround him do not make the rules. His gifts in the dark side will eventually set him free, and the dark side fights with no honor. But anyway, my friends and students of the Force, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on it being confirmed that Chimere, or the Sith Stranger, does in fact use Tracata as well as Jarkai dual blade fencing? Were you a fan of the Sith Stranger's lightsaber form, and do you want to see him in more duels as the series progresses? And what are your thoughts on Tracata making a live-action Star Wars appearance in brutal fashion? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the archives today, and as always, may the Force be with you.